The morning I signed for my diner, my brother Cole texted me a single word: finally. 6 weeks later, he pulled a U-Haul into my gravel lot at 7 a.m. before I'd even unlocked the front door, and told me his family was just staying through the summer. I want you to sit with that timeline, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why 6 weeks mattered more than 6 years. I'm Renata Voss. I'm 41, and this is the story of how I lost a restaurant I built with my own 2 hands, and how the people who helped take it from me showed up 18 months later asking to move into the next one. If you've ever been the one everyone calls the responsible one, and then watched what that title actually costs, stay through the middle, because it gets worse before it gets fair. Subscribe if stories like this are your thing. Let's start where it started. A kitchen that was never really mine. For 9 years, I ran the back of house at Union Table, a farm-to-table place my husband Denny opened the year before we married. I built the menu. I trained every cook who ever touched that line. I negotiated with 3 different produce farms until our food cost was the envy of every restaurant in the county. The deed said Denny Voss, just Denny. I asked him twice to add my name, once at our 5-year anniversary, once after I brought in a write-up in the regional paper that doubled our Friday covers. Both times he said the same thing with the same smile. Once we're stable, Ren. I promise. We were never stable. We were profitable. Those aren't the same thing, and it took me 9 years to learn the difference. Here's the detail that should have told me everything, and didn't, until it was too late. Denny kept the restaurant's second bank account paperwork in a locked filing cabinet in his truck. Not the office. His truck. I used to joke that man trusted his F-150 more than his wife. I didn't know yet how right that joke was. I need to tell you about my brother Cole, because what he did later only makes sense if you understand what he'd always been. Our dad left when I was 15 and Cole was 11. I picked up 2 jobs before I could legally hold either one, babysitting off the books and stocking shelves for cash. My mother worked doubles at the hospital laundry and came home too tired to notice much of anything, so noticing became my job too. I signed Cole's permission slips. I taught him to drive in a church parking lot. I paid for his class ring. My mother had a saying she trotted out every time Cole needed rescuing, which was often, "You were built stronger, Renata. Some people just are." I was 17 the first time I understood that sentence wasn't a compliment. It was a job offer nobody let me decline. Cole grew into a grown man who still called me when his car got repossessed. I bailed him out, literally, once, after a bar fight in his 20s, and never once heard him ask what it cost me to make those calls. I told myself that's just what family does. I was about to find out what my family thought I owed them in return. The unraveling started with a supplier invoice that didn't match the register. I run tight books. I always have. So when the produce total came in $600 over what I'd approved, I didn't shrug it off. I pulled 6 months of receipts and found a pattern. Small overages, always paid from the second account, always signed off by Denny, never once mentioned to me. I confronted him on a Tuesday after close, both of us still in our aprons. He didn't deny it. He said, and I remember every word because it landed like a slap, "It's my business, Ren. I don't owe you a ledger." His business. 9 years of my labor, and I was still a line item he didn't have to explain himself to. 3 days later, I found out why the numbers were off. Cole had been borrowing, is the polite word, from that second account for over a year. Small amounts, growing. Denny had been covering for him the whole time, quietly, because Cole had done him a favor once getting a liquor license pushed through a friend at the county office. They'd been settling accounts with money that was supposed to be mine too. I filed for divorce 2 weeks later. I told myself the restaurant would be the easy part. I was catastrophically wrong. My attorney, a sharp, tired woman named Priya Deshpande, explained it to me in 20 minutes flat. The restaurant was Denny's premarital asset. My only real leverage was proving I'd grown its value through my own labor. 9 years of menus, staffing, and margins I could document line by line. For that argument to work in front of a judge, I needed people who'd worked inside that kitchen to confirm, under oath, what I actually did there. I gave Priya a short list: our old sous chef, our longtime host, and Cole, who'd bartended for us 2 summers during a rough patch in his 20s, and had seen, better than almost anyone, exactly whose hands ran that restaurant. Priya said family testimony carries weight with judges. I remember feeling something close to hope for the first time in months. Then Denny's attorney filed his witness list, and Priya called me sounding careful in a way she never had before. "Renata," she said, "your brother's name is on his side." I sat through that hearing in a county courtroom that smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee, and I watched my little brother raise his right hand and choose a side that wasn't mine. Cole testified that I'd always called it Denny's place, that I complained about my own hours like I resented being there. That, his words, I was not exactly organized with money. Every sentence sounded rehearsed, delivered to his own knees instead of to me. During the recess, I found him by the courthouse vending machines. I didn't raise my voice. I just asked him why. He wouldn't look up from the candy rack. "You'll land on your feet, Ren. You always do." 9 words. I'd hear them again. I didn't know yet how soon. The ruling came down 3 weeks later. Union table stayed Denny's, clean and untouched. My active appreciation claim, gutted by my own brother's testimony, was settled for $38,000. For 9 years, that's roughly $11 a day, and I did that math exactly once and never again on purpose. I was given 10 days to clear my personal effects. I took 1 box, my grandmother's cast iron collection, seasoned black and heavy, the only thing in that kitchen nobody could argue belonged to somebody else. That should have been the bottom. It wasn't. 2 nights after the ruling, my mother called. I let it ring twice before I picked up, half expecting her to ask where I was sleeping. She didn't ask that. She asked if I'd heard that Cole's landlord was raising his rent, and whether, given everything, I might be able to help him get back on his feet. She said it in the exact tone she'd used my whole childhood, like reciting a hymn she'd never once questioned. I looked around the extended stay motel room I was renting by the week. Everything I owned fit in the trunk of my car. I said I needed some time. What I meant was, I need all of it. I stopped answering calls from my mother and from Cole. Not blocked, just unanswered, which is its own kind of quiet you have to learn on purpose. That night I wrote 1 line on a legal pad in block letters. The next thing I build has 1 name on it. I had no idea yet how literal that sentence would become, or how soon somebody would try to argue me out of it. Rebuilding took 14 months, and I'm going to move through it fast, because the grind wasn't the interesting part. What it revealed about people was. I started with a folding table at the Saturday farmers market, selling the only thing I had left that nobody could repossess, the recipes in my head: braised short rib, cornbread with smoked chili butter, a peach hand pie that sold out by 9 a.m. every single week. I worked a second job on weeknights, prepping catering trays for a hotel banquet hall across town, and I slept less than I want to admit on this camera. Word moves strange in a small town. It doesn't move through ads. It moves through people telling other people where to eat. A regional food blogger found my table by accident and wrote 400 words that changed my life more than any restaurant review Denny and I ever got together. Orders started coming in faster than 1 folding table could hold. I bought a used box truck at auction for $4,200, painted the sides myself, Voss Kitchen, honest food, fair prices, and started running a real mobile operation 6 days a week. I ate standing up. I slept 5 hours a night. I taped a savings number to my dashboard and watched it climb the way you watch a fever break. And through all of it, I told myself distance was the same thing as safety, that if I built far enough from my family, what I built would finally be mine, untouchable. I was about to learn exactly how wrong that idea was. But first, an old woman named Ida Kessler was about to change my life on a Tuesday afternoon in the rain. Ida ran a lakeside diner on the edge of town, the Blue Heron, that had been serving the same regulars since before I was born. Her husband had died 3 winters earlier, and her knees had started arguing with a full lunch rush. She found my truck parked outside a hardware store during a downpour, tried the peach hand pie on a whim, and came back the following week for 4 more. Then she started calling. Not about the pie, about me. Turns out Ida had been quietly auditioning me for months before she ever said a word about it. She offered me weekend hours at the Blue Heron first, overflow work, no strings, just to see how I moved in a real kitchen again. I said yes before she finished the sentence. 6 months into that arrangement, on a slow Tuesday with rain hammering the windows, she set 2 cups of coffee down and told me she was ready to retire, and she wanted to know, before she listed the place, if I wanted first right to buy it. Fair price, she said. I'm not giving it away, but I'm not letting a stranger have it either. The number was $260,000, diner and the small apartment above it included. I had $71,000 saved, the settlement I'd refused to touch, plus 14 months of nothing but grind, and Ida offered to carry a private note for the difference herself, at a rate no bank would ever match, because she said she'd rather bet on someone who'd earned it than someone who could simply afford it. I didn't sleep the night before closing, not from fear of the debt, from the strange, unfamiliar fear of finally having something that could be taken. Closing day, a title office with bad coffee and a stack of papers 11 signatures deep, and then the deed, printed plain, Renata Voss, owner. One name, mine. I drove my grandmother's cast iron up the back steps that same afternoon and hung it on the kitchen wall myself, and I stood there a long moment with my hand flat against the cold metal, feeling something in my chest finally sit level for the first time in 2 years. I got 5 weeks of that feeling before the U-Haul showed up. 7 a.m., a Thursday, before I'd even unlocked the front door, I heard the truck before I saw it. That particular groan of a rental engine that's been driven too hard for too many miles. Cole climbed out first, then his wife, Priya, no relation to my attorney, life is occasionally that unfunny, and their 2 kids, 9 and 6, both still in pajamas, blinking at the lake like they'd been told this was a vacation. Behind them, the back of the U-Haul was already half-loaded with the visible architecture of an eviction. Mismatched furniture, trash bags cinched tight, a mattress bungeed flat against the wall. Cole came up the porch steps talking before I'd said a single word, the sentences smooth in a way that only sounds spontaneous if you've never heard someone rehearse. Just through the summer, Ren. The kids can take the couch, they're easy sleepers. You've got the apartment upstairs sitting empty anyway. Then, like he'd saved the best line for the porch itself, gesturing at the diner, the lake, the whole life behind me. Come on. Family helps family. You've got all this now. You've got all this now. I want you to notice that sentence, because it isn't generosity talking. It's an invoice. Everything I own, in that worldview, exists to be redistributed the moment somebody else needs it more. I looked at my niece and nephew waving shyly from the truck, and I want to be clear with you, my argument was never with 2 kids in pajamas. It never will be. But I looked at my brother and said the only true sentence I had, "No, Cole, you can't move in here." He blinked at me like I'd answered in a foreign language. In our family, I basically had. He ran through the same 3 gears I'd watched my whole life, and I stood on my own porch and clocked every shift. First, warmth. We're blood, Ren. Remember how you used to cover for me with Mom? Second, guilt. Aimed straight at his own children like a spotlight. Look at them. They've been sleeping in a motel. Is that what you want? And when neither worked, the line he always kept in reserve, the one I'd been hearing since I was 17 years old. Come on, Ren. You'll land on your feet. You always do. Something in me went very quiet and very still, the way a kitchen goes right before the dinner rush actually hits. You can earn a place in my life, I told him. You don't get to claim one. He called me cold. He said I'd changed. He said Mom always said I would, eventually, turn my back on this family, and that told me exactly what conversation had happened in the car on the drive over, long before he ever pulled onto my gravel. He loaded his kids back into the truck. My niece waved at me through the back window the whole way down the driveway, and God help me, I waved back until the dust settled. I checked my phone. I gave it 40 minutes before my mother's name would light up the screen. It took 19. Here's what I didn't expect. It wasn't just my mother who called. It was the whole apparatus. Cousins I hadn't spoken to since a funeral. My mother's church friends. A family group chat I'd muted 2 years earlier suddenly alive again. Every message asking some version of the same question. How could you turn away babies? Not one person asked why Cole had lost his apartment in the first place. Not one person asked about the rent, or the job he'd quit, or where that money had actually gone. The only question the entire network wanted answered was why I wouldn't hand over what was mine. I want you to sit with that, because it's the whole engine of this story. The system never audits the people who fall. It only interrogates the person who won't catch them. If that's ever been your family too, put the word audit in the comments below. I read every one. 2 nights later, on a supply run at 9 p.m., I drove past the county fairgrounds parking lot and saw the U-Haul again, backed into the far corner under a single working light. The side door was open. My nephew was doing homework on an overturned bucket, workbook angled toward the light. My niece was asleep across the middle seat, arms wrapped around a stuffed rabbit. Cole sat in the driver's seat with his forehead against the wheel, not moving. I pulled over across the road and sat there a long 10 minutes with my engine off, and I need to tell you exactly what I felt, because it's the reason the rest of this story goes the way it does. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something closer to recognition. I was looking at the finished product of the exact same factory that built me, a family that raises one child to carry weight and another to be carried, and then acts shocked when the carrier finally sets the weight down. That night I called the front desk at the Fairview Motel and paid for a week, plus a grocery card, and told them to leave my name off it entirely. I learned something that night I hadn't fully understood before. Helping someone and being consumed by someone are not opposites of the same act. They're 2 completely different verbs that just happen to look identical from the outside. That Sunday, they came to make their case in person. My mother's sedan, an aunt's SUV, and the U-Haul. 3 vehicles turning into my gravel lot in a slow, deliberate line, like a funeral procession for a version of me they'd already decided to bury. My mother had dressed for it. Good blouse, church shoes, the outfit she wears to either weddings or interventions, and I genuinely believe in her mind those 2 occasions have started to blur together. I met them outside at the picnic table Ida had left behind. I didn't invite anyone in. Nobody asked why, but everyone understood exactly why. My mother opened with the family scripture she'd been reciting my whole life. Family is what's left when everything else is gone. Her mother had taken in relatives. She'd taken in a cousin's son for 2 years once, and never once asked for anything back. Now, she said, it was simply my turn. My turn, like the whole arrangement was a chore chart nailed up in some kitchen I'd never actually agreed to work in. My aunt went next, playing the part every family summit assigns to somebody. Everyone's asking questions, Renata. What am I supposed to tell people? Then my mother stepped closer, and her voice actually shook, and I want to be fair to her. I believe every word she said next, she meant completely. Open that door for your brother, she said, or you are no daughter of mine. The yard went silent enough that I could hear the lake behind me. I looked at my mother's shaking hands. I looked at my brother's crossed arms. And instead of choosing either door they'd driven out here expecting me to pick between, I opened a third one nobody on that gravel had seen coming. "No one is moving in," I said, quiet enough that the quiet did more work than volume ever could. "This place is the first thing in my whole life that nobody can take from me. I'm not the family's safety net anymore. That job doesn't exist." I picked up a folder I'd left on the table before they arrived and set it in front of Cole. Inside, an offer for 20 hours a week doing weekend prep and dish at the Blue Heron. Posted wage, same rate any stranger off the street would earn, so nobody could ever call it charity, and nobody could ever call it a leash. And a printed listing for a 2-bedroom rental 4 blocks from the elementary school. First month and deposit already wired directly to the landlord. Never touching Cole's hands, never touching mine either, once it left my account. His name on the lease. Nobody else's. Your own key, I told him. Your own paycheck. One condition. From today forward, whatever passes between us is given. It is never taken again. He reached for the old line out of pure habit. You'll land on your feet, you always. And for the first time in 24 years, I actually answered it. I was never landing on my feet, Cole. I was just the one nobody bothered to catch. My mother told me if she left that yard, she wouldn't come back. Her voice broke on the word daughter. I won't pretend that didn't cost me something on the way down. I'm not shutting a door, Mom, I said. I'm just done being the door everyone walks through. She drove off first. My aunt followed her out a minute later, pausing only to tell me she'd pray for me, in the specific tone people use when they mean the opposite. Cole stood there a long time with that folder in his hands, saying nothing. Then he picked it up, buckled his kids in, and drove away slower than I'd ever seen him drive anywhere in his life. He didn't say yes. He didn't leave it on the table either. With my brother, that was as close to yes as I'd ever been handed. It's been 5 months since that Sunday, and here's exactly where things stand. No bow on it. Cole still works weekends at the Blue Heron. He's slow, but he's steady, and he's stopped flinching when I correct him, because there's no invoice attached to the correction anymore. Just the job. He pays his own rent. Late twice. On time 3 times since. That's not a miracle. That's just what real progress actually looks like when nobody's covering for you. My niece and nephew do homework at the counter on Saturdays now. Last week I let my nephew crack eggs into a mixing bowl for the first time, and I heard my own grandmother's voice come out of my mouth without planning it. Gentle hands make good bread. My mother hasn't called. A card came at the holidays, her handwriting a little shakier than I remembered. No apology folded inside it. No questions either. I put it on my refrigerator. I mailed one back the same way. No apology, no questions. The door isn't locked, it just doesn't swing open by itself anymore. Cole and I don't hug when he clocks in. We talk about the schedule, the walk-in temperature, his kids. Once in a while he says something that sounds like the start of an actual conversation, and I let it go exactly as far as he's ready to take it, and not 1 inch further. We're not what we were. We're something smaller and slower and considerably more honest. And in a family that's spent 3 generations mistaking obligation for love, that might be the strongest thing anyone in it has ever actually built. Here's what 18 months taught me, and I'm not charging you anything for it. Love that arrives with an invoice attached was never love to begin with. And the day you finally stop being everyone else's safety net is the same day you find out, for the first time, who was ever holding one under you. If you've ever been the one everyone assumed would catch them, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this found you at the right moment, share it with somebody who needs to hear it today.